Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you to the right team. Thank you for getting us all together. It is such a pleasure to be on the stage with this solid group of individuals who I may call the creators, entrepreneurs, and successful D2C business founders. So many names in one. Thank you very much for agreeing to be a part of this. And thank you to the audience that has tuned in. So the panel today represents a variety of consumer categories. We have foods, we have personal care, we also have fashion. So each with a unique consumer journey. I am sure to have an engaging multi-dimensional discussion on direct-to-consumer business. The way we plan to run the session is 45 to 50 minutes. I have a lot of questions to ask all of you, and then we will open it up for the audience for the last 10 minutes. And that's how we go. So the topic is really very relevant on direct-to-consumer brands. It's in fact the word on everyone's lips right now. It has changed the way consumers spend their money. It has also forced traditional businesses to actually rethink their business models and practices. So let me start with my first set of questions without any further ado. That, as you individually, each of you think about your reflections, what really is the driver for recent growth of the D2C brands, and what makes D2C brands really attractive to a consumer? Is it a specific market opportunity or a pain point that existed which has now been taken care of? Is it really the right pricing which did not exist, or is it a convenience of the channel which is in the online world right now? So maybe I will start, Anshuman, with you, and then every one of you should jump in for your perspectives.
So I think not one, but a mix of all three factors. So my experience over the last 6-7 years is many of the D2C brands have specifically addressed a pain point which horizontals like, let's say, Flipkart or Amazon or Myntra's were not solving for it. So be it Pan Project or be it the perfume or fragrance business, they're solving a very niche and a specific pain point, which otherwise a horizontal may not be able to address. And the second thing is they're doing it with the right customer experience. If you see 5 or 6 years back, the capabilities in terms of operations and all were not there. So overall customer experience of what an Amazon can give versus a D2C brand can give were widely different. But today, there are many D2C brands which are giving similar or better experiences than these giants. So I think which is helping a lot in terms of bringing customer back to these brands or these D2C brands, because they get the right product at a right value and with the same experience or better experience. So in my view, these two combinations have helped the D2C brands grow exponentially in last few years.
Do I see you smiling and you unmuted yourself as well? So
yeah, I think I'd like to add to what Anshuman said there. I think a few things have created the opportunity too. So firstly, you have legacy brands that were built for the physical world, and D2C brands have been set up, digital native. So the way they really think about customer experience and the way they think about using data to be flexible in responding to customer needs is very different from legacy brands. I think that's created an opportunity to serve customers better. I think secondly, from a consumer perspective too, in India, you see the Indian consumer being more and more open to trying new brands. And I spent 8 years in the US. I feel like we're in very early days of this consumer trend in India with D2C. Feels like 2012 or 2013 in the US. And I think this openness of the customer to try new digital experiences has really created this opportunity. Lastly, the convenience of shopping from home, pandemic has accelerated that. So that's something that we're seeing, help D2C brands step on the accelerator.
Interesting that you say that we are still almost a decade behind. Pallavi, do you want to share your views on this?
Yeah, so adding to what Dhruv said, yes, things have really, there's this entire ecosystem that is coming up to support these brands. So one is, of course, the macro factors like internet penetration, and the logistics are getting simplified, the last mile deliveries are becoming better. I think more importantly also the entry barriers for a founder to start a brand are now far lower. So for example, if I had to start a brand in a traditional setup, I had to have a sales team. I had to have a budget which would run into crores to do a certain amount of advertising. But if you take a Facebook or a Google, you can start at like 40, 100 rupees you can even start at say 100 rupees, or you don't need a huge distribution team to, start your business. So I think that is one of the major factors which has also contributed to a lot of D2C brands coming up. And from the customer side, of course, because of social media and all, the product discovery has become far, far simpler. So all of this together, I think, is fueling this entire D2C wave.
That's very interesting. And Pallavi, how do you think about the importance of the market opportunity? So I see you talk a lot about the entry barriers, going down from where they were. But is it important to find that market niche which did not exist? Or is it sometimes also about similar market opportunity, but solving for the channel and convenience?
Mani, I would put it this way. The gaps always existed, but they were always a little niche. To give you an example, Bewakoof started a quirky line of shirts. So the founder, when we spoke to him, he said that this gap always existed, but the traditional retailers found it too small and unviable to cater. But Bewakoof did that, and thus they entered a gap using that. So I think the consumer demand was there for certain niches, but probably the traditional businesses were not in a position to service them. And that's when the D2C brands came in. As I said, because of lower stakes, lower entry barriers, they took that and then, became a challenger brand in their own sense.
It's very interesting. Ridhima, what would be your take on this?
So I think with how Facebook came in, with how social media came in, and I remember the early days of 2014 when Flipkart and Amazon were, just coming in. And, I remember we were introduced to digital marketing, and I used to sort of take care of it. And nobody really had the idea of where this is going to go. But I think whatever is happening, and for that matter, when we look at the pandemic, whatever has happened in the last 1.5, 2 years, I think it's just the progression of how human evolution is happening. So I think when we do a product, there's always a contradiction of convenience, because today, if we look at the 80-20% Pareto, basically, like who's purchasing, who has 80% of the wealth, everybody is about convenience. So be it how you pack your product, be it how you make your product, be it how you deliver your product, I think convenience is a big thing. And whatever is happening in the D2C segment is all the implication of how consumer behavior has changed. So I think the consumer is still the same. I think the way they want their products is growing and evolving over a period of time. And we get to know a lot of researches and so many things. I think it's going to be even more interesting going forward. So yeah.
Yes, this is the time. And Amit, as I invite you to speak, maybe I'll just add a bit of a twist to the question as well, that do you think that there are categories which are more amenable to direct to consumer businesses, and there are categories which are not as suitable? So personal care, how amenable, and some of the other categories specifically where products and services get combined. And I will go to the I will go to others as well for that, but just want to hear your perspective.
Right. So we have been a legacy brand. We have been in business for last 20 years, retailing out to shoppers and all those places. Last 3 or 4 years, yes, things have changed, and we also changed our business from a more retail format to a D2C format. I think the difference, what I see from my own experience, is people earlier had Nielsen data. People had certain preconceived notion what we sell, and somebody rightly said, about Bewakoof. In fact, I feel it is not about the fear of the volumes, but it was more about being conservative. So most of the retailers, you'll find they're very conservative. They don't want to take a chance. So like, Super Bottoms, such a beautiful story today. Just imagine a retailer selling Super Bottoms. I don't think so. I don't think any retailer would have even opted for that earlier. So I think it is about listening and also feeling what the consumer is feeling, and then curating an experience for a customer where you create something amazing. In terms of personal care, we have seen a great growth in last 4 years, but definitely.
Is it just me, or?
I think
No, it's not audible.
Okay. So maybe I'll move to you, Dhruv, because I think specifically on the PAN project, it's not just about the product, like I was saying, a lot of other things which are more iterative, like the fit will also matter. So do you think it's harder for the businesses which are a mix of in some way products and services going direct to the consumer, and what are the differentiated challenges that you would see?
Yeah, you talked about certain categories that are suited and not. Traditionally, if you looked at the tailoring experience, it's always been a physical experience. You go to your tailor, you get measured, and you do a few fittings. It's an iterative process. I think something we wanted to do early on was, make sure we can get that right digitally and save the client that work of having to go to a tailor, having a tailor come over, take the time to measure themselves. I think we've taken a few different approaches to that, right from like trying to build a quiz so that you can guess a client's size based on his current shopping preferences, which brand and fit he buys. And also just trying to use technology to, have better data on what size is most likely to fit each client. But even with categories that don't traditionally lend themselves to D2C, I think there's a huge opportunity to innovate and create a new category online. And I think clients are looking for things that prioritize convenience. I said, convenience is something and comfort is something that we've really tried to sell. So that's why we've tried to take a purely digital experience approach to a category that was traditionally physical retail.
That's great to hear. I think what I'm hearing you say is how technology can actually overcome some of those barriers on services, the iterative nature as well.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Ashit.
Sorry, Mani, one interesting thing, if you see over last couple of years, especially during the COVID, right? If you see early adopters of online shopping, were mostly young people who are looking for value or discount. But over last couple of years, a lot of people who are actually seeking convenience have jumped and joined the wagon. So you have now a set of customers who are seeking for value and convenience and are ready to pay for it. And that's why you see a lot of these D2C brands actually doing business at the right price point, making money and not bleeding like most of the e-commerce platforms, right? So that's making it viable for entrepreneurs to start a D2C brand and be profitable and do the business in the right way. Change in customer mix and the expectation of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of you have, touched upon the importance of solving the convenience for the consumer or the comfort, right? So, it's quite natural that going direct to the consumer is, of course, a big advantage for the businesses. If I may just ask, in terms of how has the feedback loop really worked for you? Are there examples of where, following consumer feedback has actually led you to some improvisation, which has been significant? Or on the alternative, there has been something which has not worked, where it has been too much of being in touch with the consumer. So any such examples or reflections that you have?
I think I can add something which, so we work a lot on NPS and we take a lot of feedback from people. So two things which we could really do well was, one is our delivery system, where we could deliver customers in a much faster way, having multiple warehouses pan-India and making sure we can deliver them in like 2 or 3 days maximum. And second thing was about, packaging, or people needing less plastic packaging, if they're happy with that. So I think those kind of feedbacks are very important and vital. Product wise, really, I think feedbacks generally get bombed because everybody has a different notion about the product. Yeah. So, but the packaging and shipping, I think, is a great way to connect with your consumer and take feedback.
Absolutely. So in fact, one of the critical factors in success of D2C journey is that brands are now able to deliver the same experience what an Amazon or a Flipkart would do, right? If they are delivering in 1 day or 2 days, there's no way you can grow or scale up if your delivery is, let's say, 4 or 5 days. So it's a hygiene now that you have to meet those delivery expectations. You have to meet those fulfillment expectations, right? So even a 1% order getting cancelled or not fulfilled is a bad customer experience. So that has become a hygiene, and you need to fulfill those promises other than delivering on the product side.
To add on to that, Yeah, to add on to that, the feedback loop with D2C brands is short. And I think that's one of the biggest advantage that these brands have against the bigger brands. And in our case, we have all mothers on board and they are extremely involved with the product because it's for their babies. And, we get these elaborate feedbacks where they'll draw diagrams and they'll say that, what, this button should be here and this elastic should be shorter. And we actually listen to all that feedback and we keep changing the product. So even if the product gets copied, we are at least a few steps ahead. And I think that has served us very, very well in terms of getting the feedback loop and listening to it.
I think, just to add what Pallavi was mentioning, we've in fact extended our product line just by hearing properly what the customer is saying. Somebody comes in and says, I have kidney issues, so if we see, almost 40% people who are coming month on month have kidney issues, we might as well do a product. So, at least 6 or 7 of the products that we've done in the last 7-8 months are purely customer feedback. I think as a brand, we are just 1.5 years old and, it's still a young brand and we are very in line with what the customer is saying. So, for us, most of our strategy is being decided by the customers. So I think it's an amazing, and the freedom of talking to them, in such a short span, I think that's an amazing thing that no retailer could do at any point of time. So I think for us, it's been really a big advantage that we could speak to our customers.
Yeah, I'd add a couple of examples more to Ridhima and Pallavi's customer product innovation. We'd never thought like custom-made cargo pants would be something that clients would want. But listening to customer feedback, customers really just want a place to store their phone, store their wallet, store their keys, just a really functional pair of pants that has a lot of pockets. And so we launched, a 6-pocket cargo pants purely based on consumer feedback. I think similar all-weather essentials as a category. It's come from clients saying they need a pair of pants that can, last through the Mumbai monsoon and then still make it through, the October heat. So lightweight and at the same time, water repellent. So really, yeah, ability to listen to customer feedback and within a couple of months turn around a product that serves their needs. Something that D2C brands have been able to do.
Yeah, all very well said. And I think, as you think of the consumer connect, I'm assuming there's a lot of effort and investment of course, technology also that goes behind the front end and the consumer connect. Where else do you see the most productive use of technology in business, which makes a difference in the success of the brand?
Mani, couple of areas, and since I'm directly involved in those, I can talk a little more about that. So see, if you look at when Flipkart or Myntra or Amazon started, they all built their supply chain tech in-house, be it warehousing, be it logistics and all, because none of the legacy warehousing technology or logistics technology were able to cater to the requirements of online e-commerce, where you have to handle smaller orders, large number of orders in a day. Now you have technologies available which can handle e-commerce order very, very efficiently at a very fast pace with 100% fulfillment. Same way we talked about, Amit talked about having multiple warehouses so that you are closer to the customer. Now, it is critical to know that what products to be stored in each warehouse so that while you have multiple warehouses, you are fulfilling your orders from the closest warehouse. Now, you have technologies available at your disposal to handle these kind of use cases. Right? Same way, intelligently deciding what merchandise will work, what size ratios will work. In example, Amit, Dhruv was talking about intelligently identifying the sizes, right? But not everyone can customize. So if you have a fixed sizes, how do you decide what sizes should you buy in what ratio? So there are now technologies available which can help you take those calls very intelligently with complete automation rather than human dependence. So that to me is one area where a lot of investments are going on right now.
I think, can I add something?
Sure.
Yeah, Amit, go ahead.
Sure, Amit, go ahead.
Hi, Mani. So I think, yes, what he's saying is very right. Technologies are available. Just being a legacy brand to moving to D2C, I felt 2-3 sectors where really you need great investment is. One is definitely your whole ERP system. I think we were on Tally, we suffered a lot. Now we moved on Oracle. I think that is something is a big challenge, the whole reconciliation process. I'm talking as an entrepreneur or as a business owner. Second thing which definitely needs investment is the CRM system, because when you are actually getting onto D2C platform and managing lakhs of customers, millions of customers, in our case we have 1.2 million customers. That whole CRM system, CRM piece has to really come in place, and it cannot be about marketing. It's more about consumer engagement and making sure what consumer really wants. And the third piece, which is very critical, is again connected to CRM, which is an NPS system. I think these are few things where we have invested heavily presently, beside the data analytics or forecasting, all those things which we work on AWS and Azure. But I think these are few things which I think as a brand one should look at. The rest is most of the times, like we are now Shopify, so most of the things are provided by them. And yes, what Anshuman also spoke about is definitely the whole supply chain management. So presently we are working with ShipRocket, but that is where it is. So whoever you work with, but I think that is where technology is really needed.
Yeah. That's the other part of the puzzle beyond the consumers.
So interestingly, recently when I was talking to one of our investors, and they asked me, Pallavi, when are you hiring a CTO? And I said, why do I need a CTO? It's a D2C brand. But then I realized that tech is playing such a critical role in the business. It is actually driving the entire business in terms of the growth, CRM, as Amit rightly said, even platforms like Anshuman, your platform, like all these are really supporting the D2C growth. And I think tech is as core as the product, if I may say, to D2C now.
Yeah. So just, moving on, and I am possibly building on what Anshuman touched earlier, in terms of, the unit economics, how important do you guys feel is to get the unit economics right upfront? Or do you see that as something which can evolve later once the hump of what repeats of consumers has happened? And maybe just to kick it off, I'll start this with, maybe Ridhima, you, because, that's the category which is usually more challenged on margins, at least the traditional business.
So I honestly came from a very conventional business background, and I never understood the concept of burning money. So we never took any funding, and we knew that there was this pressure of running the cash flows, because we had the manufacturing facility set up firsthand, which I still rethink about a lot of times, whether this was the right way to go. But especially I think everybody would agree, when you start a startup, there's a whole lot of cash flow crunch that you have. We did multiple things to get our cash flow keep running. We did white labeling initially, and a lot more things that we shouldn't have done. But having said that, I think I think that's how D2C works. If you're not really focusing on the unit economics, and for us, there wasn't any other way than really focusing on it, because we didn't have a lot of choice. We didn't want to burn any money. We wanted to break even very quickly. And, there was a manufacturing facility that had to run every day. So, for somebody like us, who's placed in Jammu and Kashmir, like logistics became like a big thing initially, because we come under special zone, and transporting and dispatching so many quantities from here was a big issue. So we figured it out on the way. Took up shared places at locations where we knew that the product really sells well. But having said that, yeah, for us there was no other way but to really focus on it.
How has it worked for the PAN project?
Yeah, I think very conscious of unit economics from the start to, family business in manufacturing of apparel. Unit economics for a D2C brand, I'd say first, gross margin on the product. You obviously still want to offer value to the customer, but typically you'd want a business with 65%, gross margins at least. And from a marketing perspective, I think it's interesting there, because brands have taken different approaches. Marketing spend, we took the decision to hire Rishabh Pant as our brand ambassador fairly early into our journey, and take a route where we would be first establishing a brand and then turn profitable. But the reason for that has been a belief more so in customer lifetime value. And so I think when we look at unit economics, it's different, time frames of looking at it. And with the marketing, I think customer acquisition costs are only going to be rising over time. So I think for D2C founders, something that's important to consider is customer lifetime value, and that's probably going to be the long-term driver of profitability or not in most D2C brands.
No, absolutely. And Mani, just to add a couple of things, right? Especially when you are running your own venture, every penny matters, right? So let's say what Amit told, right? If you are fulfilling from a local or a regional warehouse, your cost of delivering that shipment may be 25, 30 rupees. Whereas if you are doing from a, let's say you are delivering a south order from Delhi, you will end up paying almost 80, 90 rupees for that shipment. So how intelligently you plan your network, how intelligently you plan your every bit of cost, right? Be it your warehousing cost, logistics cost, or your marketing and BD cost, right? Every penny matters, and that's where these choices of right processes, right tech, and things matter.
Yeah, I see Amit having a big smile. Amit, you want to add?
I think most of them will have added the points, but yes, I think being funded and being bootstrapped makes all your decisions. So when you're bootstrapped, definitely you have to think of profit first and then anything else. And I'm very much in tune with this lifetime value concept, because I think as a brand, that is what you really need to peg yourself. So if your lifetime value is, let's say, 5,000 rupees, 3,000 rupees, whatever you're trying to peg and you want to reach, I think that is where the whole business starts making sense, customer acquisition costs. So I think that is the most vital thing for a D2C brand to think about.
Yeah. Maybe let me just shift gears and ask another question which has always been on my mind, that what's really in a name? So how critical have you all believed that getting the name right is important? And the reason I ask is because I've seen a lot of D2C businesses change the name midway, and that is not always triggered by funding. It could be any other trigger as well. So how have you all reflected on this? Has the name been critical in the journey of the brand?
I can jump in there first, since we chose the most direct name, the Pant Project. Very much trying to communicate exactly what we're trying to do. I think the thought process behind that was, a lot of legacy brands try to do a lot of things and serve many categories. We chose, and apart from the name, I think the decision of which category to be in and which business to be in is also, a key decision, much more so than potentially the name. So we chose to focus on pants, one category, and really be the leader in that category first. And that was the reason for, choosing the Pant Project as a name. We believe the category was, large enough to build an attractive business in this category first. And the reason, you pointed, in the future, potentially D2C businesses, change their names as their categories expand. I think that's something that you can only know over time. Zomato started out as Foodie Bay, and it was only food focused. So I think that's something only time would tell, but we prefer to take an approach of being, extremely direct and letting the customer know exactly what we do in our name.
Right. So in our case as well, when we started Super Bottoms, it was like diapers, so bottoms. And, we think that, okay, tomorrow, what if we expand into, say, apparel and all? Will it make sense? Like a t-shirt from Super Bottoms, how does that make sense? But I think beyond the point, it may not make a difference, because when I look at brands like, say, Super Dry, they're into everything. The brand name actually, it just doesn't kind of make sense. But I think it is up to the brand, like Zomato. What does the brand name really say? I'm not sure. But I think when the brand name is decided, probably for entrepreneurs, especially, they're, when I started, it was like just working. I was sitting somewhere at home and I decided, ki, chalo, Super Bottom bol dete. But I think that's how we started. So I don't know, in the longer run, as Dhruv said, maybe one may think about it, rethink about it.
Funny, interesting example from my side. So even though we are not a D2C brand, we are mostly enterprise B2B brand. We started, and our company is actually Next SCM. So our thought process was that we are doing something which is futuristic in supply chain management. And very soon we realized that in people's mind, supply chain is only warehousing and logistics. They just limit supply chain to that. So we were doing a lot in merchandising, planning, allocation and all, but nobody could connect us to that offering because for them, we were a warehousing or a logistics player, logistics tech player. And that's where we decided to switch our name and call ourselves Incref from a brand perspective, because we wanted to communicate that we are adding incredible value, efficiency to you in various departments. So that's why the first short from incredible efficiency, Incref. So somewhere I personally feel it matters because sometimes your brand by default can connect you to a limited section, right? Which you may not want to, right, in future.
All right. Okay. So I think we've spoken about the right market opportunity. We've spoken about technology. We've spoken about importance of the feedback loop. We've touched upon the name. Is there any other ingredient which is really important for the success of D2C brands? So I'm thinking maybe a question on how do you think about the talent in the team, beyond the superhuman entrepreneurs that you all are, how important it is to get the right team, or if there's any other ingredient which is extremely important?
I think team is the most important thing when you really look at making a brand successful on D2C platforms. I think they need to really believe in it, and from where you get them and how you get them is also very important. Certain people really have no belief, so you see the traditional retailers still they haven't jumped the gun and got into e-commerce because they still believe that e-commerce is a fallacy. And then you see brands like Myntra and Flipkart really scaling up and being the biggest fashion retailers in this country. So I think it is all about belief. So I think the mindset of team, what you acquire, is so crucial in the initial phase. I think that will be something which I will always look at or advise anybody.
No, Vani, honestly, we work with hundreds of brands, both D2C and traditional. And one of the constant challenge I've seen with traditional brands is they all want to jump into this e-commerce wagon, but none of them really understand because they have not built the right team and processes in-house. Right? They still want one person to be just running the entire e-commerce. They just don't understand that there are so many different functions to be handled, and you can't have one or two people team managing your e-commerce. It's just not going to happen. Right? So I think they're fundamentally missed out that it's a business in its own right, and it needs the right investment in team, in processes, in right technology, everything. So that's where, in my mind, traditional businesses have not yet got into this wave.
Yeah, and as we talk about the team, it's still the quality of the team that we're talking about. With Amit, like you were talking about the belief versus the quantum that I need, 5 people in my social marketing team versus having the right people. Sorry, I think Dhruv, I interrupted you.
I was saying, adding to what Anshuman was saying also in terms of team and expecting them to fulfill, different functions. I think a few key areas for D2C success, one, the ability to tell a compelling story. And I think storytellers and being able to captivate an audience digitally is an increasingly important skill. And that's part of the team we've really prioritized. And then the other is the ability to deliver on that story. And so that's customer care and ops. And I think the brand needs to both make a compelling promise and be able to consistently deliver on that. So elements of that, those two teams coming together, one often very creative and, left brain, the other very operational sort of focused, very important for D2C brands.
So very interesting.
One more thing is, I think there needs to be a marketing mindset rather than a selling mindset in D2C. Most of the companies, when they're hiring people, I think that is something which they should look at. So it's more about demand generation, as Dhruv rightly said, it's about storytelling. And I think that's where marketing comes in play. And not necessarily need to get people only from the tech side. Many times, I see a lot of my retailers who have actually got IT people to head the e-commerce. I think that's also a wrong decision to do. So that is something very crucial, I feel.
I think for us, we're still sort of figuring out the right way retaining the right kind of people, because attrition is something that's something that we are yet to crack how to sort of not do it. But in my very short experience, I've understood that it's very important that whoever you hire, right, irrespective of whether they're getting into tech, whether they should have a mindset of marketing, I think the core is, are they aligned to what your values are? I genuinely feel that, it's a brand is a reflection of your own values, especially early on, because what you believe or what you feel is what the brand will ultimately reflect.
Yeah.
Very small example, like I'm a very honest person. I don't mince words, and whatever you look on the branding or on the packaging is very straightforward, so and most of the people you see in the team are very straightforward. So I think matching the values is very important, especially in the early stage, because if the values are not matching, something will happen. They will leave, or you will tell them to leave, so I think that's very important. Other than that, I think what has really worked well for us is standing by what we say. So we were always all the time about the product, so we never said anything beyond or any emotion. There was absolutely nothing, so we just said, this is for this and you will get it, and I think it's a long way from here, but I think it just worked for us, at least till now. So I think, yeah, looking at the product or probably your USP, and then getting the values matched with whoever is coming in is important.
Pallavi, your take?
Yeah. So, interestingly, two things that I heard from the other panelists is, one is team should be great. It is the most important part, and the brand story. So I can't agree more with Ridhima in terms of value matching, because otherwise your story will be inconsistent. You will be talking sustainability, but your supply chain might be using plastic in the supply chain. So I think ensuring that the values trickle down from you to the team, to the last person in the team, I think very, very critical. So at Super Bottoms, for example, when we started and I started realizing that I need more team members, and of course we were bootstrapped, and I did not have enough funds to get people. I think that was something which was very good for us, because then I got other mothers to join the team who were our customers, who liked the brand. So even today, the core team is all mothers who are our customers, who share the same values in terms of parenting. And I think that has really helped us build that brand story for Super Bottoms. And we see that it has been consistent, thankfully, because of that. So yeah, I think very critical, both the things, they need to marry each other.
So I have heard about, creating with the consumers. I think, Pallavi, you've taken it to the next level, where you have actually brought the consumers to be a part of your formal team. So that is very interesting.
Very nice. I think, Mani, just kind of switching a little or giving a little different twist. So I think there's so much to do when you are launching a D2C brand, in terms of product, in terms of story building, in terms of digital marketing, operations, and like there is endless number of things. I think it is important for a brand or an entrepreneur to choose what they want to keep core in-house, and that can be few things, and rest you always have right partners. At least in the today's ecosystem, you will get right partners to outsource the rest of the thing, be it, let's say, cataloging, be it content writing, or things like that, which can be outsourced easily, right? And that's an important choice, because there's no way you can do everything right in-house while you build a team, but it's important to decide what to do in-house and what to let other experts take care of it.
Very true. And, I know we've spoken a lot about the D2C businesses. I'm also thinking, as you in your own spaces have competition from the D2C businesses, have you also seen traditional brands taking notice, starting to shift something, being more disruptive than they were earlier? Some of the experiences around that?
Yes, definitely. So we, of course, we are competing with our giants in the space of diapering. While we keep saying that, Lungos is a bigger market and we are targeting that, I'll be very honest, we have we are somewhere, rubbing Pampers and the Huggies of the world on the wrong side. And we have seen changes. They have acquired other cloth diaper brands. We are seeing that they have launched cloth diaper brands. And I'm glad that this is happening, because unlike a tech space where there can be only one Google and one Facebook, I think in D2C or brand space, there can be multiple big brands. And all of them will only help build those categories. So I think, yes, we at least have definitely seen it in our category.
Yeah, and also a validation of, if
We are doing
something
something
really-
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and Mani, another thing is, till now, most of the large traditional brands or legacy brands, they have treated e-commerce as liquidation channel, exposing only last season merchandise and things like that. But that's changing really, really fast. If you see most of the big brands now, they have full catalog, even season catalog, and selling at full price. So this competition is intensifying every day, and it's no more going to be easy that you don't have a challenge from traditional brands. They are coming at it very, very aggressively. Right? And many of them today have more orders on their own website than marketplaces like Flipkart and Myntra.
Absolutely. I think it's the case with us also. We have more orders on the website than the Flipkarts and the Amazons.
I think in our sector, I think Unilever has done a great job by moving all the traditional brands to even making a D2C. They just recently launched their own website also, like a umbrella website. I think a lot of players are coming in. Marico is doing the same. Emami is doing the same. I think people have got hooked onto this whole, flavor of D2C and actually engaging with the consumer directly. And I think it is helping all the brands in the, at least in our sector, personal care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in apparel, similar to what Pallavi said, like you need multiple players in a wardrobe. You don't typically shop just one fashion brand. So I think the market is large enough for multiple brands to exist. Honestly, seen legacy brands be slow to embrace like digital native or pure e-commerce. I think it's been more new brands that have been catching the eye in the apparel space. At least that's been our experience.
I'm glad to hear that the more the better is what the D2C entrepreneurs are saying. So, what a spirit. But I'm conscious of time. I'll ask one more question. It's a bit of a different question from, what determines the success of D2C brands. But, as founders, how important it is to manage yourself? Time for yourself, or compartmentalize the business from yourself. And how do you manage to do that?
I'll probably start in here because we do a health foods brand, and we also do give consultations to a lot of young guys who are founders, co-founders, doing extremely hectic jobs. And I think the balance is where you can balance your body, because unless you're not in touch with your body, it's very difficult to do the outer world stuff, So if I have to sort of elaborate this, if you're meditating, if you have a good clarity of thought, if you are in line with your body, I think your tasks become a lot easier. So I think we live in the denomination of time, but I think once you start understanding the inner mechanism of how the body works, how the mind works, it's a lot beyond the time space, and you can make much more effective way of using your time. So I think we've helped a lot of people. But having said that, yes, sometimes it can become difficult. Like I'm somebody who wakes up at 4 o'clock and sleeps by 10:30, and there are days when I have to work till 12:30 in the night, or probably 1, and I have to still wake up at my regular time. It can become a little more hectic. But I think it's the balance. And somebody, just so that, if you're not following, somebody who thinks that you're going to put in 1.5 or 2 hours of extra time of work by compromising your own personal time, I genuinely feel that it doesn't really go anywhere. So I think as long as it's right within, you will see everything reflecting out. And, I think founders or co-founders or leaders, for that matter, who are connected very well within themselves, are able to encourage their teams very well. I think everything is a reflection of your mindset. So once your ecosystem within is good, you will see a lot of relationship building around, a lot of things getting concrete around. So yeah, I think as a founder, I will surely say that's the first priority everybody should give, and I think a lot of people are doing that now. So
interesting, Mani, you brought this up because this is something I think every founder keeps on thinking about, or kind of, I won't say struggles, but does manage, because at one, and compartmentalization is the word you used. It's quite interesting because on one hand, I'm just talking to my marketing team. Instantly, I have to switch over and talk to the ops team and solve a supply chain problem. Instantly, I have to solve an HR issue. I think this compartmentalization is something you have to get pro at. I don't think there's any two ways about that.
Mani, I fully echo with what Ridhima and Pallavi said, but want to add one more angle to it. Given the kind of hectic activities and number of activities you're doing, you always need a right support and mentor.
Yeah.
While I started my journey 5 years back, I was really lucky to have a couple of our customers acting as mentors. And we had cases where one of my customer called us at 5 in the morning, okay, sit with me in Ganesh Puja. And then we sat in his office, resolved our internal issues, what our conflict we were having. And he was like, look, I will not let you get out of this room till you finish this off. Right? And that kind of support or that kind of trust when somebody has in you, that takes you a long way. You need that. In my mind, you also need that right mentorship and I would say a godfather kind of figure, right? Beyond what you can do for yourself. Same way of family support. And I was super lucky to have a family who supported me all the way along. Right? 5 years back when I left my job at Myntra, or it was never a question that why are you doing it? Right? It's are you sure about taking the jump? It was always that okay, jump and we are there to support you. I think those things matter tremendously.
Yeah, I think as a lot of the founders are saying, it's a lot of your energy transfers through to the team and transfers through to the customers. So really important for you to, turn up every day with the right energy and guide the team and company in that direction. I think it's also got to do with expectations. I think when we've signed up for this journey, we know it's not going to be a smooth ride all through. I think any entrepreneur who signed up with that, very quickly that illusion is blown away. And then, in terms of taking care of yourself, Ridhima talked meditation practice. I think for me, taking time out to work out every day, get some exercise in, always helps. After that, just doing what you have to do, controlling what's in your, sphere of control, and then just letting things play out the way they have to. Bring the right intention, the right energy to it, and then. Leave it to the team to do the rest.
Yeah, I'm glad you all shared that. Thank you for sharing. And I'm conscious of time, so let me just open this up for the audience questions now. Right, you'll be posting the audience questions. Okay, so there's an interesting question on what would be the future of the retailers if all brands decide to go D2C?
No, Mani, honestly, I think what we are talking about is one more channel or one more vertical, right? Nobody is saying that the D2C can completely replace retailers. Retailers will continue to be the driving force of the brands and all. But D2C is a new channel and it's a viable channel. Many of the brands have proven that reaching out to customers directly is profitable and it can be done sustainably. You can build a business out of it. I think that's where it is. It is not going to be a major chunk of the overall retail. It's going to be a respectable chunk, but offline retail will continue to be there.
Yeah, as Anshuman said, I think D2C brands would start off digital native and then move to omni-channel as they scale.
Yeah.
Retailers would start off with the physical channel and move to digital as they scale. But there's definitely a valid case for a physical touch point too for brands past a certain scale, and that's a natural evolution.
Yeah, I think Dhruv, you've answered the second question which came in from the audience as to if there is a path for the D2C brands to go to physical retail. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that there is a threshold post which that could start to happen, because all we are talking is choice of the channel which you the consumer first with, not necessary that you restrict that channel.
Yeah.
I think the second question, Tupperware is one of the good examples. If you look at, so might not be a real D2C, but yes, it is a D2C because they're also called partners of Tupperware. Lots of brands like that, but I think D2C is possible everywhere. You don't need to be digital.
So D2C is basically direct to customer.
Consumer.
Digital is one way of doing it, but there could be other ways like Tupperware or Chumbak did their branded stores. Though that is another channel. So
or Amway in the old world.
sorry.
Amway in the old world with
Yes,
multi-level
yes.
marketing.
And they also all so many brands who have actually scaled up so well.
Right? How can established brands protect their market share from emerging D2C brands in the category?
Pardon? Money?
There's another question on how should established brands think of protecting their market share from you guys, from the emerging D2C brands. I don't know if you should give the secret away for that.
When I think about protecting market share, I think the mindset there is that there's a limited market and we're fighting for the same market. I think often D2C brands, what we're trying to do is create new categories within existing markets. And probably the best way to protect market share is to create niches of markets that haven't been tapped by anyone. So D2C brand or legacy brand, doesn't really matter. It's can you create a product experience that's different for the consumer and creates demand that didn't exist before, fulfills a need that wasn't filled before.
Yeah.
I think one thing that D2C or the brand should look outside the Nielsen data. Most of these legacy brands are very fixated to Nielsen data. This is the TAM, this is the market size. And what Dhruv said is the right thing. You don't know if you create a new niche category and you already have a market, might be 500 crores, but that also might be huge for a D2C brand to crack it. Yeah, Anshuman, you are saying
absolutely true. Well, honestly, they don't have a choice. E-commerce online is a reality, and it's going to increase every month. So for a traditional legacy brand, they have no choice. They have to adopt this and be agile and adjust to this new reality. There's no choice on that.
This is the last question right from the audience on an explosion of D2C brands. Competition has, of course, different. And what is the differentiating factor for the success of the brand? Is it the idea? Is it the product? Is it the service or the price? I think we covered this, as my first question. But maybe one of you can give it the color for the audience.
I think it's about replicating the consumer's experience that he or she probably would have in a retail store. And, irrespective of how many factors we talk about, it's ultimately about your product and the kind of experience you can give to the customer. Now, whichever way you choose it, whatever medium you think is good for you, you can use it and make the best possible of whatever it is happening. So I think it's just about, delivering on your value or delivering on your product and, giving a good experience around it, which a retail store would have anyway done it for you, but now you don't have that capacity. So you will have to replicate that in another way in the online ecosystem. I think it's just very simple and just about that.
I think I have a different view, Ridhima. With our experience in retail and online, we still do both. Actually, the consumer really does not look for replicating the experience. That is what I can tell you from my product line. They definitely have a very different expectation when they're coming on my website vis-a-vis Amazon or vis-a-vis if they are going to buy at Shoppers Stop. All three experiences are very different. And I think we have to make sure that all these three experiences are unique and they are to their expectation. That is very important. A customer walking into Amazon today buying my product is looking for the next day delivery. Somebody who's coming to our site is looking for a more experience, more freebies, samplers, can chat with our experts. And somebody who's coming to Shoppers Stop is actually browsing through many things. So let's say if Anshuman is going to any store at Shoppers, he's browsing something and he sees something. So it's more about discovery in stores. That's what we have always realized, and that's how we have been retailing for last 20 years at Shoppers, Lifestyle, all those places. I think that those stores are more of a discovery place. People had never experienced those brands or products or services. Today, Facebook and Google are doing that job, but yes, earlier stores did that job entirely. So I think that is where I come from, my thought process from my experience at my brand.
Thank you for that, Amit. And I think rolling back up, it's been a very good discussion. I'm taking away a lot many things, and if I was to just articulate maybe 4 specific things which stood out for me, one being that the niches always existed, but they were possibly not deep enough for some of the traditional brands to even think about it or other retailers to think about it. I think the second thing which you all unanimously said was the importance of understanding what you're solving for the consumer, and the fact that connecting to the consumer and keeping that feedback loop on is really table stakes. If done well, can actually make a huge difference in the future path of each of your brands. Also, technology can't underscore any more the importance of technology, even beyond consumer connect as well, specifically when solving for supply chain. And I think thinking about it as part of technology which talks to the consumer on the promise, and part of the technology which actually then delivers that promise. And lastly, the values and the energy flowing down to the team, and how do you create that team and the board of advisors in some way around you, whether you call them as board of advisors or mentors. That's what I'm taking away. Very rich discussion. Thank you so much to all of the panelists, and I would like to thank the audience as well for tuning in for this.